pressure has become something that is much more difficult to apply in China. Chinese are much more resistant to it, whatever kind of pressure it is. I mean, gone are the days when a president goes to China and dissidents get released. And I think this is also true in lobbying for very hard, cold, sort of economic interests, that pressure often is counterproductive. So I think we're going to have increasing difficulty in making our case in whatever area it is that we're seeking to do so, because of this sort of confidence, which is in many ways born of a sense of weakness, I think, but it's more and more rigid, it's more and more resistant, and it means that the dynamic between us and them, if we can look at it that way, I think is changing quite rapidly, and it's going to make it very much more difficult in whatever field of endeavor you're in to push and get results.
And quickly, before we started talking, you said something I wanted to draw you out on in 60 or 90 seconds. We started this engagement with China with many assumptions that they would, middle class demand political power, that the Communist Party would allow a certain measure of pluralism, that they would allow a free flow of information with Western journalists, that the internet would change China, that there would be an evolution of this, and that they would be a responsible partner in the world order, a stakeholder is the word. In the last year, I think you've seen some signals that suggest that maybe some of these assumptions we've had are not as well grounded as they might have been 20 years ago.
You know, just a few days ago, I saw a friend who's an official, whose judgment I deeply respect, and he said the following. He said, I said, do you view China still as in a transition? And he said, economically, yes. Politically, no. He said, you can forget about your civil society, you can forget about your democratization, you can forget about human rights, you can forget about all these things. Not going to happen, not in the agenda. If you want to have good relations, don't go there. I thought that was a very sort of stark wake-up call. It suggested the degree to which they have now begun to kind of accept, originally a little reluctantly, what is actually there as a model. And I think it has a great deal to do with the fact that the democracies in Europe and in America are in such a state of paralysis. So I think this is a kind of a very new and it will be an increasingly vexing dynamic that we're going to have to deal with. And I'll just end by saying one other thing. It raises a really stark question in my view. If you believe, as I do, that somehow or other we have to cooperate with China because there's climate change, pandemics, nuclear proliferation, is the West, and the West I use in its crudest sense, democratic countries, are we willing to accept China for what it is? Because until that happens, and I'm not advocating it, I think that we're going to find China continuing to be in this very, very complicated relationship with us where they're resisting all the time. And we're not going to get to be able to solve any of these really big problems, which in many ways are so sort of organic, like climate change, that they sort of trump everything. So I think we're in a moment of a kind of a tipping point moment, or soon.